Sweet.
All right, so if we don't have any announcements, it looks like we've got 33 participants, which should be pretty close to our full class. So what time is it? It's 6:08. So Michael, do you want to go ahead and start, or?
Sure, I can get started.
All right.
Definitely. All right, guys. Well, welcome to this week's training. Today or tonight, we're going to be talking. Can y'all hear me fine? I'm kind of in an odd room right now. I don't know if the acoustics are strange, but can y'all hear me fine? Melinda, you're nodding. Okay, good. All right, good. So tonight's presentation will be, it's a 2-for-1. You're getting a 2-for-1. And past weeks, one person talking. Well, today you're getting 2-for-1. And so I'm going to be doing the first leg of this training, and we're going to be discussing ornithology, so the study of birds. And then the second half of our presentation, we're going to have Nicholas Griffin. He's with Texas Parks and Wildlife, and he's going to be talking about mammalogy. And the way I see tonight's training is it's kind of like that big rock star band, okay? Before the rock star gets on and starts performing, you have to have someone to get the crowd going. All right. So in the case for tonight, Nick Griffin, he's our rock star. He's going to be rocking mammals and talking about mammals. And I'm just here just to set the stage for him. So hopefully I do him well with that. And after our break, we'll take a break between ornithology and mammalogy. And then I'll introduce Nick to y'all, and you're going to really enjoy him. So real quick, I know y'all hopefully remember me from field trip, the aquatics field trip, as well as our first, the aquatics ecosystem talk. So don't really need to go too much detail, but when it comes to this particular subject matter, this is an area, a study that I am just truly fascinated with. I really love ornithology. I love birds, and that's my I'd say my main area. You know, you've probably heard many times or heard Brent. He loves dragonflies, and he does a really good job with that. And a lot of folks have their areas. Of birds, definitely my area that I'm really passionate about and interested in. So hopefully you can take a lot of what I'm saying and learn about, and hopefully help you down the road or get you interested in birds as well. And I like birds for a couple of reasons. But the main reason I like birds is growing up, maybe much like many of you, being outside was something that was really important. Always wanted to play outside, be outside. And the love of animals, I always loved animals and wildlife growing up, and always wanted to pursue a career studying animals or working with animals and so forth. So birds were my favorite growing up because they were always available. Okay, I go in my backyard. I didn't see very many herps out there. I didn't see fish. Mammals, yeah, I saw fox squirrels and the neighborhood cats and so forth. But birds were the group of animals that I would see more plentiful and more diverse, had a wide diversity when it came to birds. So that's kind of where my background is. I've just enjoyed birding. A shameless plug, at the Nature Center, I lead a hike every month called Early Birds from 8:30 to 10:30. It's not that early, I don't think, where we go out and we look for birds. And I help all the participants learn how to identify birds by sight, sound. Monday, we were focusing on silhouettes because the sun was out. But I encourage you, if you're definitely interested in birds, come out and partake in one of those early birds programs, and hopefully you can learn a lot from that. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in my presentation. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I'm assuming someone's monitoring the chat, so you can just jump in and stop me if you have a question. And I'll be happy to answer questions, or we can wait to the end. Either or, I'm very relaxed and easygoing. So anyway, let's go ahead and continue on. Let me share my screen. Let's find my.
I do have a question. When is the early bird talk monthly?
Okay, well, we used to We used to do them every Monday from 8:30 to 10:30. As we're trying to get back to our normal set of programming, I'm going to start offering them monthly still, but I'm probably going to offer them like the first and the third Monday of every month, and go from there. So they'll be the first and third Monday of every month. So that's when they'll be, and that's on our website. You'll see those programs. So love to have y'all out there. All right. All right, everybody can see the screen. I lovingly call this my bird brain program. I love this program. All right, this presentation. So let me start off, and I'm gonna go ahead and start off and insult your intelligence for a little bit, or maybe insult my intelligence. But as I said earlier, growing up, birds were very available, very diverse as far as the different species. And growing up, one of the things I enjoyed was identifying them. And there were some basic birds that I knew, okay? And basic birds that you probably know. So humor me a little bit, and I'm gonna throw some slides up. And someone just chime in and tell me what the bird is. Starting with this one. I think I heard someone say it.
Blue jay.
Blue jay, all right. Give yourself a pat on the back, all right? So there's the blue jay. A lot of other common birds that we find in our backyard, such as?
Charlie?
Crow.
American crow. Okay, you'll hear this one, especially if you come out to the nature center, American crow. How about this one?
Cardinal.
Male and female cardinal.
That's right. Ooh, very specific there, male and female. So yes, you have a northern cardinal there. You have a male to your left in the bright red plumage, as well as the female on your right. And real quickly, why are they different as far as colors, or what's the benefit of being different?
Attracting mates.
Attract mates. Exactly. The male wants to be very showy and attractive, so attract a mate. And the female being drab, what's the purpose of being drab?
Protects the female with her nest.
Exactly. She blends in and conceals herself when she's on a nest. Exactly right. So a fancy word for that, where a male, and you can tell the difference between male and females based on color and so forth, is called sexual dimorphism. So you can see different traits in them. And a lot of our songbirds display this sexual dimorphism. All right, y'all are doing great. You're 3 for 3. What's this?
A heron?
That's a good guess. It looks heron-like.
Cormorant.
I'm sorry?
A cormorant.
Not a cormorant. Good guess. I like your guessing.
Ibis.
He ain't from around here, is he?
No. Bird's not from around here. And the whole point of this slide is when you're looking at birds and you're learning birds, you want to focus obviously in your world, and then eventually you get out. And you may come across a bird in your backyard, not like this bird here. This is called a hammercock. You may encounter a bird and look at it and it's like, what in the world is that? I have no clue. So then you get in your bird guide and you're trying to figure it all out, and finally you do. Well, I had this same issue when I was growing up. I was outside, it was winter time, and I've seen all the other birds, and this bird just popped in. And I looked at it and thought, well, first of all, that's a really cool looking bird. But number two, what in the world is that? So I got my bird guide. It'd been a while because I knew a lot of the common birds. And I'm sitting there going through the bird guides, and I finally found it. And what's this bird?
Cedar waxwing.
Cedar waxwing, exactly right. So I found it, and that's when I got hooked. A lot of people who are interested in birds, they can tell you the bird that really got them into birding, or if it's a dragonfly or something else, they can tell you that one that really got them in. And this is the one that got me into birding because it was now fun. I was sitting going through the field guide and trying to determine what I saw. So again, this was my, oh yeah, I'm into birds now. And so anytime I see a cedar waxwing, I always think about that moment when I found that bird.
Hey, Michael.
Yes, sir.
I remember right, isn't that like most people call that the keystone bird?
Oh, right. The one that got you going.
Get you hooked, yeah.
Yeah, I call it the hook bird. It got me hooked. Okay, that definitely
That'll
got-
work, that'll work.
Yeah, yeah. So now let's transition. I just wanted to show you that just to kind of give you my background of how I got into birds, and it's a matter of finding new birds. But there are different views of birds. Okay, people look at birds in many different ways. I would also say the same about y'all. I guarantee of all the trainees, there are all different views of birds. Some people think of birds like this, like, oh, they poo on my car, they poo on my deck, my doorstep, whatever, and they look at this, and this is what they think about birds. And I remember whenever, my dad, he knew I loved birds, and one day I was washing my car, I waxed my car, man, it looked beautiful. And then above, some doves started pooping on my car. He looked at me, he's like, how do you like the birds now? I was like, well, I still like them, but not as much right now. But people kind of associate birds as being dirty, and they are and can be, okay? Some people may have had some interactions with birds and got attacked by birds, or a bird came close to them, especially in the summertime when a bird's like on a nest and they're maybe above a door and you're walking through the door and the mockingbird comes and dive bombs you. Maybe you have that association, which leaves kind of a bad taste of birds. But then you could be someone like myself, and I would say a lot of folks who just go outside, they get the binoculars and they're just enjoying birds as a form of recreation, a hobby. And by the way, this is my early birds from yesterday. I took a photo of that, and you see we had a lot of people show up. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, people, it's a big business and a big, I guess, interest. They really love birds and love seeing them. But today we're going to be that third one, but we're also going to talk about why. I mean, it's cool to like birds. It's cool to know what they are. It's cool to find out what they are, but it's even more or cooler to understand why, what role do they play in our environment? And that's the connection that we have to make. We have to say, well, that is a wonderful ecosystem and there are birds there and we must protect it. Well, why? Well, they're pretty. No, they are, but it's more than that. And that's what I hope to accomplish tonight. So this is kind of the outline that we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to talk about the technicality, the insides and the outsides of birds. Talk about why they're so important, and talk. We may, I doubt it, but get into bird migration, adaptations, identification, and classification. Probably gonna have to stop at bird importance, which shows you there's a lot of stuff to cover. So let's talk about the technical world of birds. Now, let me ask you, if you're describing a bird to somebody who has no idea of what it is, what would be your description of a bird?
The beak and the color.
Okay, so it's an animal, has beak and exhibits various color. Okay. What else? They can fly. Okay, we know birds can fly, right? Okay.
Habitat.
Okay, so based on the habitat, you're gonna have certain types of species based on the habitat. Okay.
Scaly legs and claws.
Scaly legs and claws. Okay, good. So those are some really good descriptions. Okay, very good descriptions. So what are birds? They're in the class aves, and basically the skeleton definition of birds that I refer to as the bipedal, meaning walking on two legs, vertebrate with feathers. Now, I didn't put flight in here, if you notice. And why didn't I put flight?
Flightless bird.
Yeah, there's some flightless birds as well as animals that do fly. But we all can agree, yes, birds fly, okay? Most birds fly. So it's a bipedal vertebrate with feathers, and they share characteristics between other taxonomic groups such as mammals and reptiles. And let's go over those real quick. So some of the mammal-like characteristics that they share that Nick will talk about a little bit later, maybe not as much detail because he has other cool stuff to talk about, but they're homeothermic, which means they can regulate their body temperature, much like us warm-blooded. We can do that, and so forth. Four-chambered heart, large brains and eyes, especially in relation to their body. They do have true flight, once again, there are some flightless birds. Like everything in life, there's those exceptions and asterisks. They provide a lot of parental care, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about that. And they have that bipedal locomotion. Now, I know there are mammals that are on all fours. I get it, but they do share that. As far as reptile-like characteristics, someone mentioned scales. So yes, they have scales on their feet. They lay eggs like most reptiles do. They have air sacs, okay, inside of their body. They share that with some species of turtles. And they have an uncinate process or processes that are on the rib cage. They're struts to basically strengthen and support the rib cage, which we'll talk about that when we talk about the skeletal system. So again, it is a special group of animal, but it does share characteristics with other animals such as reptiles and mammals. So two things I want to talk about before we talk about the importance of birds is weight reduction and power generation. These guys are built to fly. And what are some things internally that allow them to do that? So we're going to talk about number one, weight reduction, okay? And then we'll talk about power generation in a minute. But weight reduction, one of the ways that a bird can be, now they want to be as light as possible, obviously, because they're flying. Okay, they want to be as light as possible. So having certain structures will prevent that from being light. And one of the things that allows them to be light and fly are feathers. And if we were doing this in person right now, I'd be handing out some feathers for you to look at, so you can see some of these things. But real quickly, feathers are keratin-like structures, very similar to scales, claws, nails, and beaks. Okay, so made of that same component. The amount of feathers on the bird, depending on the species of bird and size and so forth, there's a wide range. You have some birds that may have as little as 940, and they counted them 1, 2, 3, an estimate 900, anywhere up to 25,000, depending on the type of bird. So a lot of these feathers on the bird's body, and that basically takes in about 9 to 20% of a bird's weight. So again, very light. The primary functions of feathers to insulate them, to help maintain their temperature. One of my jobs right out of college was I moved out to Salt Lake City, Utah, and I worked for a group called Hawkwatch International. And what we would do is we had injured, non-releasable birds of prey. Particularly, we had red-tailed hawks and Swainson's hawks. And we would take these birds to schools. And living up in the Rockies, it's pretty cold in the wintertime. And I remember days where I would go in mornings to go get one of the birds, and I would put my hand right there inside of the feathers on the chest. And, oh man, it was so warm. I'm like going, it's cold. This Texas boy is like, oh, this is really cold. I put my hands on, it feels good. So those feathers, the primary function is to maintain that body temperature, keep them nice and warm. Obviously essential for flight. And then also the color for ways of communication, as well as camouflage and so forth. So those are some of the primary functions of feathers. Some of the secondary functions, there's a list of them there. Swimming, sound production. American woodcock uses those feathers to help make sounds. Mourning doves, when they're flying off, they hit each other, make some sounds. For hearing, being able to manipulate those feathers so that they can triangulate sound. Water repellency, such as waterfowl. Tactile sensation, basically feeling. Think about, say, a nighthawk that have these rictal bristles. They're right there at their around their beak, allows them for tactile to feel. And then also in some cases, not around here, poison. They have poison on those feathers. So once again, those are a lot of functions and the purpose behind those feathers. It's not just flying. Now, there are different types of feathers. To your left there, you see all the different types of feathers. Okay, so tail feathers and the flight feathers on the wing, those are primarily your retrices and your remiges. Those are for flight, okay? Then you have some others like semi-plumes, fallow plumes. Again, they help, you're closer to the body, keep them nice and warm. And then you have bristles for, again, tactile and downy to keep the bird warm. So those are different types of feathers and they function differently for the life of that bird. And then the picture on the right is of a raptor there. and you can see the different groups of these feathers. So as I said, your flight feathers on your wings, the first 10 are called your primary. Those are the feathers like you see like a vulture or a bird fly, and it looks like he has fingers at the very tip. Those are those primary feathers that really help that bird to fly. Then you have secondaries and tertiaries and so forth. So those are the different types of feathers you would find on a bird. There's many more, and I'm not going to go in all detail. In fact, I showed some pictures of them a little bit later of those. So let's talk about the basic feather structure. So I should have brought a feather with me. I don't have one here, but anyway, the main, like that white middle, that's called the shaft. Okay, rachis as well. And from that main shaft, you have all these little barbs. Those are all the little pieces that go outside of that barb, as you can see there on the diagram. So you have all those barbs, they're just all along the edge. And on each one of those barbs, you get a magnifying glass. And again, if we were in person, we would do this. You can look and you can separate them really, really closely, and you'll see all those little barbules. The barbules are on the barbs, and those are the hooks. And that's what allows the feathers to clasp, if you will. Think about Velcro. It's a very similar situation with Velcro. You have a hard part, and then all those series of loops and so forth, so they connect. And that's a very simple explanation or comparison, if you will, of the structure of the feather. And these feathers, they have the ability to get together really close. And then as they're flying, they may get their feathers all ruffled. And then they go through a process to get those feathers back to normal again. They use their beak. And can someone share, what's the term for a bird whenever it's using its beak to comb its feathers and get them back to normal?
Grooming.
Okay, they are grooming. You might know that. I'm sorry? Preening. Yes, preening. That's preening. So preening. So they do the preening process to get those feathers back. And that's very important. Like us, we wake up, at least yours truly, this side, I sleep on my left side. So all my hair is always sticking up in the morning. So I have to comb it down so I look somewhat presentable. Well, it's the same process. I wouldn't get my hair messed up saying, well, that's my hair up, gotta shave and start over again. So birds can't do that. They spend a lot of energy growing those feathers. So they have to do everything they can to maintain those feathers so that they're fully functional, and they do the process of preening in order to do that. Now, over time, different seasons, yes, they will lose those feathers a few at a time through a process called molting, especially when they're migrating, as well as they go from non-breeding to breeding. So, but that's the basic structure of a feather. Now, on the bird's body, there are different areas. Now, you would look at a bird and think the bird's just totally covered in feathers, and that's not true. If you were able to and lift those feathers off, you're going to see some areas where it's just basically skin, and then you're going to see some tracks where the feathers are actually come out. So the feather tracks is called the terle, which is basically, if you see there, I'm pointing to myself, around the crown, their nape, their back, their tail, along the edge of their wings, and so forth. That's where all the feathers are going to come. Everything else, the apteria is bare skin. So don't be fooled when you see a bird and all the feathers it's fully covered. That's not the case. And then those feathers come in on the terle, and those follicles come and grow from that. So that's where the feathers are grown from. Okay. Real quick, if you look at any field guide, I prefer Sibley. You got the Ken Kaufman. You have the National Geographic. There's all sorts of field guides out there. And in the first few pages, you're going to see a lot of this showing the overall coverage of feathers. And that's very important, especially when you are trying to, you're leading a birding group and you see a bird that has a white crown, or I'm sorry, say a rufous brown crown. It's a sparrow. And you say, oh, you see that bird over there? It has that rusty reddish brown crown there. So you know what they're talking about right here. Or the malars right there, like a falcon has those malars, there's like little black strips there. So being aware of all these types will be very helpful, so that when you're communicating with each other, you can say, well, yeah, look on the upper coverts. Like, upper coverts, what are you talking about? And it helps explain and know what you're seeing. And there's some more of terms for the different types of feathers. So I encourage you, if you do go out birding, to kind of learn some of these. That way you can share that and be able to explain that to someone who's trying to figure out what a bird is. We were doing that on Monday. We saw a wide-eyed vireo, and one of the individuals mentioned wing bars. So those little white bar or lines or stripes on a wing, we call wing bars. That way you can say, oh, well, it can rule out certain birds. All right, so now let's talk about some of the systems, okay? And
Michael?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but real quick, there's a discussion going in chat right now about if you find a feather, can you keep it?
Oh, that's a good question. And the answer is, technically, you cannot keep that feather. You have to have a permit through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in order to have that. Now, the reason they did that, made that a law where you can't have those feathers is because back then, people would get birds and feathers and use them to ride with and so forth. So people would, kill the birds and, to get those feathers and so forth. So they made it a rule or law that you cannot keep feathers because then you'd be associated as to harming or killing that bird. So it's guilt by association. Now, if you have a feather, and we're going to have a Texas Parks and Wildlife guy come up here shortly, so he can really answer this. But a lot of times they're not going to say, oh, I bet you that person killed that bird to get that blue jay feather. Most of the times we find it, right? So technically, no, you're not supposed to have it. Now, we do have permits through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that allow us to have the birds we have. As a result, we can have those feathers because we use them for educational purposes. So I have to stick with that and say, no, you're not supposed to have them. Also, I think about, sanitary issues, you don't know what that bird had and so forth. So those are my, by the rules of the book. So, but I know individuals who have them, who found them in the yard and they have them. So I'll leave it at that, but technically no. So hopefully that answers your question. Now, the difference is if you're like, say you like waterfowl and you hunt and you have a hunting license and you can hunt waterfowl. Well, that's a different story compared to like hawks and other raptors and so forth. So just keep that in mind. I'm not going to tell on you. All righty. So hopefully that answers that question. So continue on talking about the systems that allow for birds to reduce their weight and able to fly. And their skeletal system is totally designed to assist in this matter. First of all, they have light air. They have a hollow bones, relatively hollow bones, where you have that airy feel of air. It's not heavy. Doesn't have a marrow like mammals. They have a long neck. A lot of birds have twice as many bones in their neck as we do. That gives them the flexibility. Think about an owl. Owls' eyes are fixed. Okay, they can't move their eyes around, so they're always in one direction. So in order to see a different direction, they have to have a lot of flexibility in their neck. And having the long, more bones in their neck, twice as many as we do, gives them that flexibility to turn their head almost 360 degrees. So that's a pretty cool feature. Not so much for weight reduction. They have fused bones that are fused together. So that helps reduce weight because it limits the amount of bones, but it also increases the strength. So it's kind of twofold. Strong bones as well as a reduction in weight, because where there were 2 or 3 bones, now it's just 1, okay? The ribs are supported with those unsnip processes. You can kind of see that on this diagram here. You can see on the rib side, those little, looks like little triangles, if you will. Those connect each rib to give it the support. And think about all the flight as they're flying, all that movement, having those supports there, again, strengthens that the skeletal system in that area. They have a sternum just like we do, but it's modified. It's that big breastplate. You can see that big piece there that's kind of hooked down. So that's called a keel. And then they're lightweight because they don't have any teeth. So that's another way they can reduce their weight. And these are measures that they use the skeletal system and do that. So here's an image of a hollow bone or bird bone on your left. You can kind of see all those openings there. Makes it nice and light. And compare that to on the right there, you can see an eagle where it has very similar to that left picture, and humans have the marrow and so forth. So much heavier and it's dense, weighs them down. For us, birds makes it light. And we talked about the unsnip processes. So again, that helps stabilize their skeletal system, That's not necessarily weight reduction, but it was part of the skeletal system. So I wanted to throw that in there because I think it's a really cool trait or body structure for a bird to fly. The keel in their neck, as I said, long neck helps them to give them flexibility. And that keel is very, very important. We know most birds fly, so they have to have really good muscles, have really good muscles. I was going to say musculature and combine 2/3. Going to turn into George W. Bush here, making up some words for you. So anyway, that keel there allows muscles to attach to. I think the next slide, yeah, I have it. So this is like looking straight on to a bird. You're looking right at his eyes. You're looking at him, okay? So you see all those muscles that attach to that keel, okay? And in order to fly, you got to have strong muscles. You're constantly flapping. If you're not soaring, you're flapping. These birds are migrating long distances. It's like you walking all the time and running all the time. So having big, strong muscles are very important to have, and they connect to that keel. So that gives them that ability to fly. And again, yes. Did someone ask something? Okay. So again, they don't have teeth. That helps reduce their weight. And I'm sorry if we have any University of Louisville grads out there. Y'all don't have teeth, okay? The cardinals do not have teeth. I know it looks mean, you know, but they don't have teeth, okay? So no dentists are necessary, no teeth there. And again, it helps reduce your weight. You may think, how in the world is that gonna help? A couple of teeth, how's that gonna reduce? But you gotta think like this bird here, it may weigh like 2 pounds. So it makes a big difference. Some of these birds, you'd be surprised at how light they are, okay? Their digestive system helps reduce their weight as well. They have a very intricate digestive system, okay? It's a relatively short digestive system as well. And one of the ways I describe it is, well, birds, again, want to be as light as possible. So they want to do everything to reduce their weight, okay? Everything to reduce their weight. And I may be getting ahead of myself here, but what is one of the first things you're sitting there, you're looking at a bird, you're starting to approach a bird, and before it flies off, most times, what does that bird do?
Like before it flies off or when it sees you?
Yeah, before it flies off. He sees you about to fly off. What does it do?
Crouches.
Squats. He squats.
He squats and then he does what?
They poop.
He poops. Yeah, most of the times they poop. Once again, reducing their weight. Okay, they will reduce their weight. So they'll go poop and then fly off. So the digestive system on a bird is relatively short. Think about a hose. You have a 50-foot hose and a 10-foot hose. You turn the water on, the water's going to come out obviously faster with the 10-foot hose, okay, compared to the 50-foot hose. So they have a very short digestive system, okay, so that helps reduce their weight. One of the things that they can do, as you can see in the diagram there, hopefully you can see that, right below their neck, they have a thing called a crop. It's basically the extension of the esophagus. It allows them to store food. It allows it to regulate the amount of food that goes into its stomach and digest it. And a lot of times you'll see a bird that's just eaten, and right there in his neck, it's just really, really big. And because of all that weight, it's really hard to fly. And I have numbers of stories, especially when I was in Utah, where people would call us and say, I have an injured bird in my backyard. We go look at it, and it has a really big crop. And we'll explain, well, it just ate, and it's got all that food, it hasn't digested yet. So it's too heavy, you can't really fly off very well. So you'll see that. They do have a two-parted stomach. They have a glandular proventriculus, basically the ability there where they have digestive acids to break down food, as well as a gizzard. It's a muscle. It's like teeth, if you will. It's used to grind. It's a keratinized structure that helps grind down food. They may use stones and seeds and so forth, or I'm sorry, stones to help, again, further break down that food. And then it goes in through their intestines where more secretions come to break down the food. And eventually it goes through the vent, which is multi-purpose, where they release solid/liquid waste. And then also they use a vent for reproduction and egg laying. But again, it's a very short system. and it helps. It's a very efficient one and allows them to reduce their weight. And I was saying I was getting ahead of myself. People have shirts. Every taxonomic group has their own shirts, and here's a whitewash one where it has all the poop from different birds and it's labeled. And this one says birds poop every 15 minutes. So I must keep on going. Don't want to get under some birds pooping. So that's that. Now let's talk about the reproductive system. Even the reproductive system has a way of allowing a bird to reduce their weight. In case of birds, some of the reproduction organs shrink to tiny portions. When they're non-breeding, a lot of their reproduction organs will shrink to very small amounts because they're not utilizing them. There's no point. So again, it allows them to reduce their weight. However, whenever they do get into a breeding season, some of those reproduction organs, they go the opposite way. For example, this is a Japanese quail here. So the testes in a Japanese quail can swell from 400 to 500 times its original size, especially during breeding season, and can swell up to amounts of 8 to 3,000 milligrams in 3 weeks. So again, they have that ability to regulate that during reproduction, and most of the time they're lightweight. And in case of females, they can have 1 ovary as well, as opposed to 2. So once again, ways to reduce their weight when it comes to the reproduction system. One of the other things that they allow to reduce their weight, kind of along the lines of reproduction, is egg development. All birds lay their eggs, and laying their eggs, getting them outside of the body, gives them the ability to long incubation periods, so limit them carrying the eggs. So now they've laid their eggs and I feel good again. I'm light again, but still generating heat to incubate those eggs. And then most of those chicks are altricial, meaning requiring assistance of their parents, if you will. All right, so that's weight reduction. Okay, so now real quick, let's talk about power generation, and then we'll get into talking about the importance of birds and making that connection. So power generation, basically they have lots of flight adaptations that allow them to fly. Now, we've already talked about ways that they reduce their weight, but let's talk about how adaptations and ways that they can, they possess, they do in order to fly. We're going to talk about, again, the warm-blooded aspect of things. We probably won't talk about musculature because I moved that slide and I forgot to update that. We'll talk about the respiratory and the circulatory system. So when it comes to birds, bring on the heat. They like it hot, okay? So Texas, they're like, yeah, the hotter the better. Birds actually have a very high body temperature. And I mentioned that those birds in Utah, I put my hands in there, boy, it felt so good. But birds actually have high body temperatures. And this is what allows them to withstand living in cold regions up north because of that body temperature. It can range anywhere from 105 to 112. Think about your worst fever you've had, 102, 103, whatever it is. Imagine 112. That's pretty warm, okay? And they like that heat, okay? And the reason they like that heat is because of a couple of things. Number one, it increases their reflex speed and their power and endurance. So the hotter it is in their body, it basically stimulates their nerve impulses. They increase, which gives them the ability to react faster, good reflexes, but also gives them the muscle speed and the strength. It increases with the body temperature. So being able to maintain that body temperature gives them the ability to react fast, also gives them that speed and strength for their flying. So heat is actually a good thing for them and their internal body temperature. Now, there are things that you have to deal with whenever it's hot, right? So they are warm-blooded animals, but they don't just sweat. So there are other things that they have to do to maintain that body temperature. And a lot of times you'll see them opening their beaks out and they're panting much like a dog does. They're releasing heat there. They'll also lift up their feathers. Okay, they have the ability to manipulate their feathers, open them up, releases that body heat as well. And one of the coolest things I love especially we got kids on a field trip, we talk about urohydrosis, which is the ability for a bird to defecate and poop on its legs and allow breeze or come in and have that evaporative cooling. So despite the fact that they like the heat, they have to still deal with it. And these are the ways that they can deal with that heat. So, all right. So the opposite, how about the cold? That's Texas. It's not cold here, right? Well, we have our times, right? But in the colder regions where birds are, and I said birds can withstand living in cold regions. They have a lot of different adaptations for that. A lot of people, when they think of migration, they think birds leave because it's cold. It's not the cold, it's the fact that they don't have the resources. So if there are enough resources around, like gyrfalcons and all the birds in the north, they can find food. Well, now they have to offset that and be able to keep themselves warm in order to find the food. And they can do a number of things. Number one, birds up north, they're a little larger. That generates more warmth, allow them to handle the cold temperatures. They have an elevated blood flow to legs and head. Now, one of the concerns that birds have to face, especially in colder times, is the transfer of heat, okay? Basically losing all that body heat, okay? Think about, the opposite in Texas. We don't keep our cold, door, you have the AC at home and kids open the door and all that. You shut the door, you're letting all the cold air out, right? Things like that. Same thing is the opposite as far as you want to keep all that warmth in. So birds have to basically prevent as much transfer of heat. So think about ducks. They're paddling here in Fort Worth in those cold waters. And you think, man, those feet have to be cold, right? They're in that cold water. Well, they are cold. But the thing about it is the blood that's circulating down, that goes down into their legs, because it leaves all the way up top, and by the time it gets down into the water, it's not very warm anymore. It's on the cooler side, and it matches the temperature of their legs and being in the water. So as a result, there's really not a big transfer of heat. It's kind of, okay, this is fine. I can handle this. So that's why a lot of birds can withstand cold temperatures. They fluff their feathers up, okay? So that allows it to almost trap the heat in their body. They'll huddle. You see them shivering. Of course, when we're cold, we start to shiver and shake. That's our body's way of warming us up, all that movement. And I said they will huddle as well. I remember we had I guess it was about 10 years ago, a really big snow event back in 2009, actually. And I took advantage of it. So I'm walking around the nature center and there are some cedar trees. And you have these cedar trees, and below this on the ground, there's no snow because the cedar trees were blocking all the sun. But what was cool was all around the bottom of that tree were all these mourning doves. There had to be like 20, 25 mourning doves, and they were just all next to each other doing this huddling, again, to keep warm as much as possible. All right. And then lastly, a bird can also withstand these cold temperatures by basically reducing their body temperature, and they go through a state of torpor. Torpor, basically that ability to lower that body temperature, once again, to prevent that big transfer of heat. They don't want to lose all the heat. So being cold, well, there's not much heat to let go. And then wait for the morning sun to come in, and then they can warm up. One example is hummingbirds can actually bring their body temperature in the case of during torpor to 54 degrees. That's a big drastic change between the hundreds to 54 degrees. Again, prevents the transfer of heat, which is the big picture when it comes to birds. All right, now let's go to the respiratory system. They have a very efficient respiratory system. Okay, very, very efficient. They can take in over 95% of the oxygen from the air, and with the use of air sacs that can force that fresh air to their lungs. So I have a picture here of all the different air sacs that a bird may have. You have the interclavicular sac, which is by the clavicle, cervical sac, the neck. You have some thoracic sacs, posterior, anterior sacs, as well as an abdominal sac. So all these sacs, again, allow the bird to take in all the oxygen, be more efficient. So here's an example of it. Let me walk you through this. So we have an image there, hopefully you can see that, of an inhalation and exhalation, okay? So what we have here is the very top one to the right, where it's all kind of pinkish color. That's a bird, that's the first inhalation. So the bird goes, brings in all that oxygen, and in the middle is the lungs, okay? So all that air goes into their lungs, all right? Some of the, as you can see in that demonstration, some of the air does go out after that first inhalation, but not all of it. And as they take in the air, it goes into their lungs. And while it's in their lungs, They're getting all that oxygen from it. Then they have an exhalation where they let it out. It goes to a series of sacs. Once again, it has the ability to take more oxygen out, and then they can release that out. And again, all that goes out, but they've actually had the ability through 2 inhalations and 2 exhalations to trap and get all that oxygen up to 95%. Very efficient, very efficient. And the last thing is the circulatory system. Birds have large hearts, okay? So they're beating fast, and they have to do that. And they have to eat a lot of food because of that, that work that their circulatory system puts on them. They have the ability, because of the large hearts, to pump more blood. It beats faster. And that also allows them to have that heightened blood flow in their leg and their head, which, as we said, for birds that live in colder regions, getting that blood to their legs is very important, okay? A general rule is for birds, the heart rate increases as the size decreases. So for example, this hummingbird here, because he's small, that heartbeat is going so fast. But then a larger bird, it's going to be a slower process. So, and also relates to how long they can live. Faster the heartbeat, the shorter lifespan they're going to have, which are smaller birds. The larger the bird, the slower the heartbeat, the longer they're going to live. You think about eagles and so forth. So that's something that's really interesting, a correlation between lifespan. All right, guys. So got through all that. That's basically the ins and outs of birds, about how birds use their body to help reduce their weight in order to fly, as well as all these other adaptations that they have in order for them to have that power generation, ability to fly, and basically the ability to survive in a day-to-day process. So now with the last section, I want to transition and talk about conservation efforts and avian importance. Once again, this is the important thing. You can talk about how cool birds look, but we have to understand, why are they so important, okay? And where they've come over the years. And I say years, I mean decades and centuries and so forth. So real quick, I'm going to talk about 4 different eras, if you will, or time periods that birds have gone through and what they've gone through in those real quickly. So human expansion, the exploitation of resources, the chemical era, and modern life, the globalization, and development, and so forth. So, you know, way back when, way before Brent was born, we have a lot of Polynesian expansion, and the people there, they would, you know, use birds for many different things. As a result of that expansion, thousands and thousands of species became extinct. Also, the rats and pigs and goats and so forth played to that. But as we expanded, we started using the resources around us, right? However, we overexploited things in some areas. So the eastern forest, deforestation. As a result, there was a loss of forest specialists, birds that live in those forests that you had one job to do. You had one job, and unfortunately, they couldn't do those jobs because they were being exploited and lost. And then market hunting, you know, shorebirds and hawks and so forth were being hunted. Again, just exploiting those resources for an array of reasons, which we're not going to get in that really. I found this is very, very interesting, talking about the exploitation of resources. Sometimes we think, well, gosh, there's just so many of them. What we do is not going to cause any issue for it. And this was actually found in the Ohio legislation, 1857, a committee report talking about passenger pigeons and hunting. And they were quoted to say, passenger pigeon require no protection because no ordinary destruction can lessen them or be missed from the myriads that are yearly produced. Basically, we can do whatever we want. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of these birds. There's nothing we can do that's going to cause them to, you know, be explored or, you know, lessen as far as population. Boy, were we wrong, right? So as a result of that exploitation, we've lost a lot of key species of birds. I have a list there of birds. You can read those real quick. And these were all, again, because of the hunting aspect, the loss of habitat and so forth. I have question marks on the very bottom of that ivory-billed woodpecker. That was a bird, I think the last time officially was seen was in the, I'm going to lie here, 40s or 50s. I think it was in Cuba, if I remember right. But in the early, I say the early 2000s, there was a big stir because someone down in the, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I believe it was down in the Louisiana area, in the bottomlands of Louisiana, someone spotted what they thought to be an ivory-billed woodpecker, but was considered extinct for over 60 years. And they had video of it, and as a result, everybody, I don't know if you remember this, I do, but a lot of people, friends of mine, they would take trips all the way down to Louisiana, and they would get on these scouting trips to see if they could find this bird. They never did. We've yet to see, legitimate footage and so forth that they ever found it, but there's hope, right? There's hope out there. So the era of exploitation, that takes us into the chemical era. And one of the main things, and this is probably a review for a lot of you folks about DDT and the effect. You probably learned about this in school and heard about it, about how DDT was a chemical that was very destructive for birds, particularly falcons, eagles, and pelicans, and many others, where the DDT was used to get rid of mosquitoes and so forth, and these undesirable pests and insects. But as a result, it would get on the food sources for some of these animals, such as other birds. The falcons and the birds would eat other birds, and they would get that chemical in their body. Now, it didn't directly kill them, but it bioaccumulated, meaning it just built up in their body. And it built up and it built up and built up to the point where when the females were laying eggs, the shells would be so thin when she would incubate it, they would crack, or in some cases wouldn't even have a shell. So basically that DDT, as it bioaccumulated, it affected the ability to produce that calcium in order to produce a viable egg. So there are many people who study birds, and then you also had Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, talking about the robins, and then also the DDT. And it became the forefront during this time. We started seeing less and less of these birds in the wild. Like, what is going on? And finally, they pinpointed to DDT, where they banned it. Also, the Endangered Species Act came into effect around this time. So through those observations, protection came in, and that was really important for birds. So they had to deal with that chemical area, and they still do, because there are some countries, you got to think about, birds migrate internationally. One example are Swainson's hawks. They'll migrate all the way from Alaska all the way to Argentina. And they may be migrating down into South America, into places where, well, DDT may still be used, or another chemical that may affect them. So they still have to battle through this, even though I talk about this in the 60s or whatever, they still deal with that. And we have to be mindful of that. And then the last thing that the birds have to deal with, the challenge is globalization, or the development. Markets drive land use, mining, timber, agriculture. These are things that we need, but that's probably the main reason or effect that birds face when it comes to their endangerment, their extinction, is because of this lack of habitat. They don't have the places that they used to before, their territories. And some of these birds are specialists, where they need that particular species of tree or plant or so forth. So it makes it difficult for them to reproduce and increase their population. And then modern, I lied, one more, modern issues. Birds have to face, again, I've already talked about habitat loss. And part of that could be because of some of the other things. Fire suppression, the lack of fires. There was a period of time where it was discouraged, and no, we don't want to do prescribed burns. We don't want to set a fire because you think of the potential for that, right? But because of that, when you suppress fire, and Daniel Price, here's your plug, Daniel, for the Master Naturalist next week meeting. He's going to be talking about using fire, but this is a modern issue. So not doing fires actually prevented or encourages the encroachment of plants. So then you lose habitat that way. You would think, well, it creates habitat for others. Well, it could, but it's also taken away. And then you throw in the fact that some of these, the encroachment from these shrubs could be invasive species such as Chinese privet. Okay, so those are issues for birds. Collisions into tall buildings as they're migrating. They get disoriented as they're flying, and the lights reflecting from big tall buildings, and then they hit it and they fall down. That's a big issue. When I lived in Atlanta, I had my advisor, or mentor, my supervisor. He was amazing person. He had a project where he would go downtown Atlanta and he'd walk around the big skyscrapers in Atlanta during migration season and literally pick up trash bags full of birds as they're migrating, colliding into tall buildings. Collisions is something they have to face, as well as wind turbines and things like that. So these tall structures, because they're spinning fast and sometimes they hit those. So these are things that birds have to face and deal with. And we don't want these things to happen because birds are very, very important. I tried to find the most current state of the birds, but I have last year's up here. You can go to the North American Bird Conservation Initiative or Audubon. You can find out this information. But the state of birds isn't looking great. It's not looking great. In fact, there's some steep declines in various groups of birds, such as forested birds. These are numbers based from the 1970s using data over a span of 50 years, which is a pretty good sample size, right? Well, forest birds have gone down 22%, shore birds 37%, and grassland birds over 53%. Again, this loss of habitat and chemicals and all the various things that we just talked about. So they're facing a lot of things, and we don't want that to happen because they're so important. Now, there are some successes. Turkeys down in Texas, or the importance of conserving is because of like Texas, it says they're $42 million to the economy through hunting, good, ethical hunting, and so forth. So there are some good things that coming we see from birds, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to skip that one there. So now the last thing I want to talk about, unless I have more time, is the importance of bird. We talked about how birds are cool. I like them. We talked about how what they are, how they fly, what structures they use to fly, what allows them to reduce their weight to fly. We talked about all that. We talked about the perils that they faced. And we want to prevent that because of this right here, the take-home message. Why are they so important? Okay, well, here's a list of them we're going to talk about. They're environmental indicators. They are indicators of healthy systems. They're money saving. They save money. And you're going to see some numbers here that's really fascinating. They help with controlling insects, diseases. They help disperse seeds. They recycle nutrients. They're pollinators. They help with plants. And they provide healthier environments. And it's a big business. It's a really, and that's my hobby. If I'm not at work or I'm not at home on my days off, I've had to build the birds. Okay, so it's an interest of mine and a hobby. So let's talk about them. Okay, and some case studies, some research that's gone into why birds are important. So first of all, they're environmental indicators. The presence of birds in an area tell you how healthy a system is. Just like when we did the dip netting in the aquatic field trip, we said certain species, dragonflies, damselflies, water scorpions, and whirligigs, all these species of macroinvertebrates are an indicator of a clean water, healthy water. Well, same thing with birds. They can tell you a lot about the health of a system. Think about Rachel Carson back then, noticing the decline in birds and scientists during that time. There's no birds around, something's going on. So they can do that. In fact, there's been some studies. The first one there says the Cascade bird calls. They were doing these up in the Cascades, these surveys and listening for migratory birds as they come in, or wintering birds, and noticing that they're coming earlier. Okay, they're arriving earlier, and that you think, well, what's the big deal? It's good to be early, right? Well, it's not good to be early whenever everything you rely on, such as food sources, are not available. Okay, so there's this influx in our weather, in our climate, and so forth that affect when birds are moving back and forth. So that is an indicator that's there's something going on there. Why are birds coming earlier than normal? Well, it's just a change in our weather. I think back years and currently where we can find scissor-tail flycatchers here in the Fort Worth area all the way into October, early November, because it's mild. Temperatures are not cold. So he's like, yeah, I'll hang out here. There's plenty of insects. Okay. Tree swallows, they've been studied up in the East Coast and back, and looking at the numbers of them and how the food that they eat, that has toxins and contaminants, how it works up their chain and it affects the numbers there, as well as common loons there in that same general area up in the Northeast, and how the amounts of mercury in the water and the coal and the impact of coal industry. And I'm not slamming them, okay? But I'm just saying that they have high elevated amounts of mercury in the water, which affects the fish species that they eat, in turn affects the loon. So you see less loons, less tree swallows, less all these birds, like something's going on. And in king penguins, I find this was very interesting. There was a research. They would capture these penguins, they would put these heart monitors around their chest and let them go. And what they're finding now is some of these penguins, they're measuring that heart rate and they're noticing the heart rates are much, much higher than they had before, which is indicating that they're working harder or going to further locations to find their food source because of their range, the loss of ice and so forth. So now they have to go further out, and it's putting a lot of strain on them and it makes it really more challenging for them. So again, all those studies, basically when you sum it up, is there are things going on with the amount of contaminants in our waters, the climate, and how that's affecting our avian species. And it should cue us in on something's going on, and birds play that role. They're really good at insect control. Once again, I used to live in Salt Lake City, and the settlers there in Utah, when it came, if you've ever been there, it could be barren and so forth. Especially when they came in, they had crops, but then all these insects were consuming their crops, and all of a sudden, this California gull comes in and starts eating all the insects. That's why the state bird of Utah is the California gull, because of that, and how they help keep all those pests out in order for them to have the crops. I thought that's an interesting story. There's a place down, I can't remember exactly where it was. I don't think it's Costa Rica, but Q Park, where they have shade grown coffee. And they had some insects that were destroying the crops. So there was a study, what they did was they wanted to figure out ways to get rid of all these infestations, these pests and so forth. They didn't want to spray chemicals and so forth. So they put these nets around, I guess, these houses, if you will, these crops. And what they noticed was that the woodborne insects, or not woodborne, the insects were being consumed obviously more that were near the houses. They put these structures to encourage the birds to come around where those crops are. And all the crops that were near all these birdhouses, if you will, they thrived and did well, versus the other ones that didn't have any houses nearby. They actually were destroyed by the insect. So as a result, they started putting all these houses out, and it saved them about over $1,000 an acre in order to keep pests out. So it was a big savings money. And in Missouri white oaks, woodborne insects, having all the birds there actually prevented the amount of woodborne insects. And again, furniture and lumber is very, very important. And then the last one I want to mention is up in California. There were in the winery, where all the wine. I'm drawing a blank already. But anyway, just on the vineyards, whatever. There's this larva that was causing a grape blight called Perez's disease, and it was killing all the grapes. So this Perez's disease. But they did the same thing where they put these boxes near where all the larvae were, And again, they encourage those birds, Western bluebirds, to come nest there. And then all the food, they eat all the larvae. So again, they're very important to get rid of insects. As a result, it saves a lot of money. They're also very essential for reducing the amount of disease. There's a situation down in India, okay, where first of all, cows are sacred, right? They're very sacred there. So there was they prohibit the slaughter, the consuming of cows. So back in the 90s, whenever they would, these cows would die, vultures would come in and consume them. But they started noticing that these vultures, their necks would droop down and they didn't look so good. And the population declined over 99%. Big, whoa, that's definitely a red flag, right? When you have 90%, over 90% of your particular vulture species decline. And what they found out is in those cows, they were giving them a chemical or something for anti-inflammatory called a diclofenac. And what happens is it killed the birds, it killed the vultures as they were consuming the cow that had died. So eventually they banned for the most part of it. It's still used in smaller quantities, but they banned it and that helped. And before that even happened, all the dogs would feast on these dead animals because of the vultures being gone. And that increased all the rabies. It was crazy. So once they got rid of it and reduced it, there was a notice of about $34 billion offset of having to, as far as removing the dead animals, as well as also the diseases and how it affected the locals medically and so forth. So crazy. Seed dispersal. They're very important for this. In fact, there's a tree called a white bark pine up in the Northwest. And this particular bird, can someone tell me, anyone want to guess what bird is this?
Nutcracker.
Who's brave? Who's brave?
Clark's Nutcracker.
Bingo! Good job, Clark's Nutcracker. Not from around here. Darn it, this is a cool looking bird. But anyway, up in its range in the northwestern part of the country, they hang out in these white bark pine forests. And the only way that their seeds get dispersed, or the primary way that they get dispersed so the seeds can go, is the nutcracker. The Clark's Nutcracker can go in and pull out the seeds and obviously eat them, and then they poop and they can disperse seed, right? So these are specialists when it comes to dispersing this white bark pine seed from the cones. And one thing they noticed, there was this blister rust caused by the mountain pine beetle. And it was a really big deal. And it was causing, less and less white bark pine. So what they wanted to do is, okay, we need to go in there and get all the healthy white bark pines. And we need to get those seeds out and disperse them. Whoa, that would take a lot of money and effort to pay people to go in there and collect all these cones and do it. And then realize, wait a minute, this Clark's Nutcracker, they have the ability to do that. And it saves a lot, over $11 billion letting the birds do it versus letting, hiring people and allowing them to do it. And then the last one, Costa Rica, there's these bellbirds who like to eat avocado, and they disperse the seeds in the open ground. And when they do that, as they spread the seeds, they like the open ground and they spread it out. If they were to do it in a smaller concentrated area, this particular seed would have an increased probability of fungal pathogen infection and wouldn't do so well. So having them dispersed wide in an open area, that helps the avocados, and that's a big part of their economy there. So you can see birds, seed dispersal is very important. And then the last thing, hobbyist tourism. Again, this is what I'm about. I love going out and visiting places. Maggie Marshall, Lake Erie, they can generate over $20+ million in revenue. Over 200 jobs are created based on this. So it's a really cool story. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, state that people traveling to go birding can generate, it's like 12 billion in travel, moving places, as well as equipment, scopes, cameras, binoculars, and so forth. Any of you have ever been to Costa Rica or places like that where you want to go birding? Well, you pay a tour guide, you pay them, and that's really big money for them. It's very important for their economy and so forth. So it generates a lot of revenue. And then there's the non-monetary value. It improves cognition and your mental health. At least me, if I can't be outside, guys, man, I don't know what I would do if I don't have the ability to go outside. And then seeing birds, it just increases my mental health, if you will, and just really brings me to a good place. And, you know, I can give you all the little kumbaya about the importance of that, but it really does. It really does. You can ask my wife. Okay. So what's being done to protect these birds now? Well, every state has wildlife action plans. They give incentives to landowners in order to utilize their land to encourage birds, particularly in their area. There are groups and organizations that buy and manage lands strictly to have that habitat for birds. Lots of research. There's research all over the place. Education, that's important. Educating people about the importance of birds. And then being involved, doing citizen science. There's yours truly about 60 pounds ago, talking and educating the public about birds and so forth. So raptors, they're so important. That was the big take-home message when I was in Salt Lake City. They play an important role in the environment of being that top predator and so forth. So having those birds around you, seeing that means there's food, okay, and they help regulate and monitor the health of that ecosystem. And then lastly, citizen science. There's so many different citizen science projects out there. eBird, just going from left to right there, eBird is kind of like iNaturalist minus the georeference aspect to it, where you can log all the birds you see in a particular area. And say, for example, you're going to go to Maine, and you can look up the state of Maine and look at different places and see what birds are being seen. So that's kind of cool. Project Feeder Watch. We actually do Project Feeder Watch at the Fort Worth Nature Center. So I think y'all have to give volunteer hours. Is that right? I think you have to give volunteer hours. Well, you can volunteer and help us at Project Feeder Watch, where we count and document all the birds that come to the feeders, and all that information is submitted to the lab of Cornell, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and that's where we get the ideas to what are we seeing, all the birds and where they're being seen, and then we can find, they can use that data to determine declines and so forth, or potential diseases and stuff that some birds may exhibit, you know, by being seen at a feeder. Great American Bird Count. This one weekend you go out and just count all the birds like your backyard in your area. Nest Watch, Yard Map. These are all cool things that I encourage you to Google and look up. So with that being said, that's the end. Okay, so we went through a lot of stuff there, and So I'm going to stop, take a deep breath, and take some questions if you have any.
Do you want to talk about the bluebird boxes?
You're talking about the Bluebird Project?
Yeah, yeah, right.
Well, there is we're going to have a section on this where we have volunteers from all, organizations that welcome volunteers to come help them. I'm going to close this shade to help with their organization. And one of them is there's a project with bluebirds where you go out. And again, I know Mary Beth, you can share more about it, but go out and monitor bluebird boxes. And that's important. Again, you're getting data as to, you know, the success rate of the bluebirds in our area. I think that's on the east side of Fort Worth. I don't know. But we do have bluebird boxes at the Nature Center that we don't necessarily monitor. And I've said it for years, and I've said it for years, and I'll say it one more time. Okay. If you're looking for a service project, I'm thinking like as a group, maybe we would be open to listen to a proposal for y'all to maybe put together some bluebird boxes, maybe some wood duck boxes, and then have Master Naturalist volunteers come in and monitor those. We would love to have that at the Nature Center, but I know, Mary Beth, you're talking about another organization that monitor those bluebirds. So you'll learn more about that in the coming weeks.
Great job, Michael.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure,
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. Do birds share their nests? Because we have a heronry across the river from us. And sometimes I think that the egrets come in after the herons are done and go share those nests with them. But maybe it's also young herons. I'm not sure.
One thing in life, it's hard to go with absolutes. Some cases you can do absolutes. So I try to avoid absolutes. And I would say that there's probably a small percentage or birds that will do that. Primarily, a lot of the nests I see, it's pretty much that particular species, but I would not rule it out. But when you think about a rookery, which is basically a collection of egret and heron nests, I have seen where egrets and herons are hanging out nearby. So they may utilize the same area. And again, the nest structures are very similar anyway. So it's possible. I'm not going to rule it out, but I will also go and say that most of the times I see them isolated in their own individual nests and so forth.
Michael, I have a question.
Sure.
So it was last October, this one bird followed us, my husband and I, around for about a month. Every time we would go outside, it would just kind of fly nearby. One day, we're sitting outside having coffee, and the bird kind of sits right behind my husband and starts like hitting his, just flying into his head. And my husband got out of the chair, and then the bird went back and, sat down or rested. What does that mean?
That means he's not living right. He must be doing something wrong. No.
That's what I said.
Yeah. So, I mean, birds can display territory. Obviously, they can be territorial. So it could have been that. I don't know what species of bird you're talking about.
I have the video of it, and then I have pictures of the bird. I'll send it to you. Maybe you can identify it.
Please send it, because I'd love to see that. But there are species of birds that, for example, American crows, corvids are very intelligent birds. And one of the things that studies have shown with crows is they conduct funerals, if you will. And they see a dead crow, they'll conduct what we would equate to a funeral in a sense. But they go further than that. Say, for example, there's a dead crow and it's nearby, and there's a gentleman with black hair and standing right next to it. And the crows come and they see the dead crow, and then they look at that gentleman with the black hair. And what they're doing is they're associating that gentleman as hurting and killing that bird. Mm-hmm. So in their minds, for however long, I don't know, they see a man with black hair. They're like, hey, that's the one that killed that bird. Let's get him. And they'll attack him or harass him and so forth. So I'm not saying that's exactly what happened. I just know that birds have that tendency to do that. So that's very interesting. So it could be a territorial thing. It could have been this aspect of enacting revenge on a loss of a fellow feathered friend. So.
And when crows come in, we notice that like the cardinals and the blue jays and other birds aren't around. Do they scare off the other birds?
They can definitely do that. Crows have the ability to try to establish their territory or claim their area through a series of attacks. That's called mobbing. And when they mob a particular group of birds, it's usually owls, hawks, and raptors, because those birds are more seen as detrimental to the area. They can kill other birds and hunt other birds and so forth. So crows in numbers will come and attack and mob owls and raptors and so forth. So as a result of this continued behavior in a particular area, the cardinals and the blue jays and so forth may see that and like, oh, there's those crows again. So they kind of vacate the area. But usually it's more along the lines of a raptor, a bird that's kind of seen as a potential danger for them. But I'm sure the Blue Jays and Cardinals have picked up on it as well.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like bird baths and bird feeders? And if you're for that, what species do you think like bird feeders should kind of gear towards in this area?
This is a really interesting question. And I can't remember Rachel Richter. She may have already done this in the first class or will do it in her next class. Talks about how people view certain things like feral cats and so forth. When it comes to feeding birds, you get a little bit of both. You get individuals who, I like feeding birds because it attracts birds to my feeders, and my bird bath encourages them to come as well so I can view them, enjoy them, and see them. Then there's some other individuals who look at feeding birds as a detriment to them, like you're giving them food and they're relying on you and so forth. So there's two different schools of thought, and probably more than that. Me personally, I like to attract them. Again, I want, particularly at work, I want people to see the birds so they can enjoy them. So then I can lead into some of these conversations or discussions that we're having here about the importance of birds. So, yeah, we have a courtyard with a water feature that encourages birds to bathe and to drink. And then we do put out various seeds to attract the local species. So that's, safflower, that's black oil, sunflower seeds, it's suet feeders and so forth. So I'm on that side of it. I want to attract them so I can see them, but share them with everybody else that visits. So if you want more specifics on what to get, I'd be happy to have that conversation with you at another time. You can email me and so forth. We can talk about that.
Hey, Michael, one more question at least.
Okay.
Someone asked in the chat, what's one of our local special birds would you call?
One of our local special birds. Ooh. Whoever asked that question, is there something a little more you want to add to that? I'm trying to think of how to answer that question.
That's a pretty individualistic answer in my opinion, but I mean, we got a lot of great birds, right?
Yeah, there are.
Taylor, you want to chime in and give any more info on are you just kind of asking for people to chime in with what birds they like?
Yeah, like when we did the herps, there was the I think it was a spiny lizard. So I saw one of those. I think plants, we have what is it called? The yucca. So kind of just like something along those lines bird wise that we kind of keep an eye out for.
Gotcha.
One of my favorite, and we're getting into birds that are migrating, so birds that are coming, moving into our area for the wintertime. Sparrows. I like sparrows. It's a group of birds they're hard to identify. So, but also I like them because a lot of times when you think of sparrow, you think of the house sparrow, the non-native bird that just takes over nests and so forth. So I like to tip it to the positive side of the native sparrows that come, like fox sparrows and so forth, that are found in our area that utilize the resources like the prairie and so forth. So, again, it's kind of hard to answer that question because there are a lot of special birds out there, but that's one group that I like, especially this time of the year.
I got a question. So if a bird eats seeds directly, so not like where it's eating a fruit and digesting a fruit, but if it just eats a seed straight up and then it poops that seed out whole enough that it can germinate, is it getting any sort of nutritional value out of that seed, or is it just like eating enough of them that hopefully some of them get broken down, that one's just an accident?
Right, because they're eating multiple seeds, right? So some of them are going to get pooped out and germinate and so forth. Some of them are also going to be digested and allowing them to get the nutrients. So it's, so it's that latter part of that question where through the series of eating, some of them are going to, fully digest it, provide the nutrients and satisfy their hunger and their need, versus those the one that got away or the ones that get away and so forth. And as I said, that digestive system is so, it's short. So as it's taken in and those, the gizzard and proventriculus are breaking everything down, some of them just get away. And then those are the ones that they poop out, germinate. And that's why you see a lot of roadsides, especially under power lines, you see all these trees that just along, fences and so forth, because they sit there and there they go, right?
Mhm. Well, kind of tied into that, do birds also eat things that help with digestion, like bits of grass or stones or something like that, to aid the whole churning of the food inside?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. You'll have birds that will digest stones and small rocks, again, helping the grinding feature to break down the food. So definitely. I mean, the gizzard itself is kind of what we refer to as the avian molars, but then that's an added, digesting these stones is an added way to, again, further break them down and to get the nutrients that it needs. So definitely will do that. All right. Okay, guys, it's 7:33. So we have our next speaker is going to come in. I don't want to steal all of his thunder or his time, but if we can be back in about, I'd say 7 minutes. Nick, first of all, Nick, are you there? I know I saw you on there.
There.
What's going on, Mike?
Nick.
What's going on?
All right, Nick. So if they were to come back at 7:40, would that be good for you?
Works for me.
Okay, so guys, come back at 7:40, and I'll introduce our speaker and go over one little thing about the field trip, and then I'll give him the rest of the time. So go take a break, and we'll see you in about 6-7 minutes. Set the bar.
Okay, watch yourself. She just started the recording back up.
All right. Well, Nick, what I'm going to do is I'll introduce you, and then I'm just real quickly just going to reference the forest field trip if you're okay with it. I won't spend too much time. I want to give you as much time as you can that you want. I don't want to shortchange you. So Rob said you're supposed to go like 3 hours, but hopefully you have enough time.
Where's he at?
He's at home.
And Daniel?
Yeah, Daniel. I'm at my house, so that's kind of nice. So
Yeah.
they're doing good. They're doing good. They're doing good. So tomorrow we have our new council member for our district, the Nature Center. So we're giving him a tour of the facilities. So we're excited about that. Get him on board just to see the Nature Center and get excited about it. So
good.
That'll be fun. So we got to be on our best behavior tomorrow.
That's right.
All right, guys, go ahead and start settling in. We're going to go ahead and get started here in about a minute and continue on with our our training tonight. So go ahead and have a seat, and you're going to enjoy this aspect. Like as I said earlier, and there goes Jim having a seat. Man, perfect timing. He's the model student. There he is, right there, front row. But as I said earlier, guys, we do have a 2-for-1 tonight, and like I said, I'm the opening act. Here's the main attraction right here. So I want to introduce you to Nick Griffin. Nick Griffin is one of the best people I know. I mean, the guy is just solid, just a good guy, very knowledgeable. He's a graduate of Tarleton State University. He actually had a stint at the Nature Center, working at the Nature Center, and then he accepted the position working currently with Texas Parks and Wildlife. And he may share a little bit about that and how it relates to mammalogy and so forth. But one of the other things I want to say about him is, Nick, he served our country, and I just want to say thank you for your service to our country. I think that's a very important thing, and it really molded you and molds you and kind of helps you with everything else. Just an even keeled guy, and you're going to really enjoy him. He has a really good program with Mammals tonight. So that's Nick Griffin. And I went out of order. I should have told you about the field trip. Now I'm going down. But real quick, forest field trip is this Saturday. Okay. A lot of it is very similar to our aquatics field trip. You should have gotten an email notification with an agenda. You're going to meet like you did with me. You're going to meet there at the service center. You'll get your group assignments there. This time we'll have 3 groups. You're going to be in 3 groups. You're going to have a birding aspect of it. So you're going to have Tom Haas. He's a member of the Fort Worth Audubon Society. He's from the north. You're going to love his accent and very knowledgeable with birds. You're also going to have our natural resource technician at the Nature Center, Dustin. He's going to talk a little bit about forest management. And then Laura is going to take you on a forest hike as well. So you're going to be rotating with those 3 different groups. There's going to be lunch in there involved, obviously, and a break as well. So you should have things to bring, usual things: backpack, water bottle, hat, sunscreen, snacks, a lunch, because we'll eat at the boardwalk, and binoculars. So arrive at 9, carpool best you can. She has her email, her phone number there. Give her, like I did, call, text, please, if you're late or can't make it. You should have got that email. If you have any questions, you can always email her. Her number's on there as well. And ask all the questions regarding the forest field trip. But I just want to put it out there so we all know about it. And it's the same place, same time. So definitely review that and call us if you have any questions. So that being said, I'm not going to take any more time from this part of the presentation. Nick, thank you so much for volunteering your time with Master Naturalists and educating us about mammals. So I'll turn it over to you, buddy.
All right, appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for having me. I really enjoy doing this. It's a lot of fun. Thanks for the introduction. No pressure, right? You know how to put the pressure on someone, but I appreciate the kind introduction, and I wanted to further introduce myself a little bit. I know a couple of folks in the crowd there, but not everyone. So as Mike said, I was in the Marine Corps. When I got out, I was kind of looking for something to do, and I was looking around at different colleges, and I saw Tarleton's a wildlife program, and I was like, oh yeah, that's the one that I want, because I love to be outdoors, and it really spoke to me. So I went there, and while I was there, I did my internship there at the Nature Center, fell in love with it, and was very fortunate to graduate from Tarleton on a Saturday and start at the Nature Center on a Monday. So it really worked out for me. But since then, I've moved on. I now work for Texas Parks and Wildlife in the Inland Fisheries Division. So I kind of took a 180 there, and it's kind of awkward being the fish guy doing the mammal presentation. But hey, I'm a mammal, so I think I qualify. But one of the classes that really stood out to me at Tarleton was mammalogy. So while I took that class, I just fell in love with it, and I just really got me going into some skull identification stuff that we'll get into later that I really get jazzed up about. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
Good. Awesome. All right. Share my screen here. I think this is how this works. All right. Everybody see that all right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Get my bearings here. Yeah, so here we go. Isn't this the quintessential mammal you think of whenever you think of mammals? Is the almond, right? That's kind of what I put there. So what we're going to talk about is what is a mammal. We'll talk about mammal taxonomy, mammal origins, dentition, adaptations, locomotion, reproduction, and then, of course, my favorite, skull identification. So what is a mammal? Anybody help me out here? Any thoughts? Guess this?
Live birth. They give live birth.
Right. But some snakes give live birth too, so that's a good one.
They're warm-blooded.
Yeah.
They have hair or fur.
Hair's a good one. What else? There's one big one.
The mammary gland.
Yeah, there we go. All right. That's it. Okay. So this is what my professor there at Tarleton, he said, mammals are hirsute, lactogenic, endothermic, homeotherm. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but that's right. Whenever you ask, somebody asks you, hey, what's a mammal? Just say they're hirsute, lactogenic, endothermic, homeotherms, and you'll be good to go. So obviously, hairsuit is with hair, like somebody mentioned. Lactogenic produces milk, right? Endotherm, warm-blooded, and homeotherm is they maintain that body temperature at that constant level. So like the birds. And you have your Master Naturalist book. They talk about that in page 518 in your book there. So break down this a little bit further. Endothermy and homeothermy. Endo is like inside your maintenance of your relative constant body temperature by your produced from inside your body, your metabolic processes, you're kind of heating up from the inside. And then your homothermio is your regulation of that constant body temperature. You're keeping it the same. Mammal taxonomy here, everybody remembers from biology that King Philip came over for a good soup. So the kingdom is Animalia, the phylum Chordata, subphylum Vertebrata, class Mammals, right? And then that's further broken down into two subclasses, Protheria, Theria, and then that class right there is broken into two infraclasses, Metatheria and Eutheria. So we'll go down and break that down a little bit. Chordata, this is a huge group, right? There's like, corals in this as well. So at some point in the development, you possess a notochord, a hollow dorsal nerve cord, pharyngeal slits, and endocele, post-anal tail. And so that's just something at some point in your development. Subphylum Vertebrata is the chordates with the backbone. So we have a backbone, obviously, and then class Mammals, which is your hairsuit, lactogenic, endothermic, homeothermic. So that's that. So further breaking down that, subclasses of mammals, you have Protheria, break that pro first piece is your egg-laying mammals like your duck-billed platypus. And then you have the other subclass Theria, which is broken down into two infraclasses, Metatheria and Eutheria. Meta is like middle, Eu is true, so marsupials, and then your placental mammals like we are. And they talk about that in your Timbers Master Natural book on page 519. Continuing on, so mammals started at roughly 200.
One or two. I've had enough. I'm out of here. We've gone to events where just because of the nature of the park and what they're
guys are just running. All right, we're back up and going again. So these tiny little guys are running around at dark, at night. Really little guys in the Triassic period. But they kind of evolved and came about at nighttime. So even today, a lot of mammals don't do so well with color blindness and things like that. So that's one reason. Some of the evolutionary changes, we have jaw manipulation. So your jaw to be able to go side to side is a really big deal, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Heterodont dentition, obviously huge deal. We'll get into that a lot. And then your limbs rotated from 90 degrees from split out. Think of like an alligator, they kind of walk like this, where instead of coming up underneath you. And then obviously some other evolutionary changes as well. So dentition, this is a big thing. So like it says there, much of this mammal success is related to its teeth. So mammals are the only vertebrates that masticate, that chew their food. Okay, so incisors, your canines, premolars and molars. Think about all your herbivores. You're breaking down that plant material. It's really hard to break down, but it gave them access to be able to do so. So it opened up a whole different option for things to eat, and just different avenues to approach, right? Since the dental formula or dentition is so important, they came up with a dental formula, and this is how it's broken down. You kind of split the jaw from upper and lower jaw. You get your right side, left side, and then they split that in half. So it goes incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. And here is a bobcat. So you got 3 incisors, you got 1 canine, 3 premolars, and then 1 little bitty molar there in the back. And basically, you would just kind of double that because it's going to be the same on the other side. And then that's kind of how it's broken up. And so this will kind of come into play if you're looking at like a key. If you find a skull, it can kind of help you determine between some species and things like that. And they talk about that in your book on page 523. So here's a lot of different tooth variations. We'll cover a few here. This is from a white-tailed deer, a selenodont dentition. You can see these ridges. Y'all see my mouse there? Yeah. So these ridges kind of run in line with the jaw, right? They're in line with the jaw. This is in their cusp, and these will, obviously break down. So whitetail, they're break down forbs and all kinds of different things. Their teeth run in line with the jaw, so that's big on the Solenodon. And then you have Lophodon, where this runs transverse with the jaw, these ridges here. This is a beaver. That's called Lophodon. Stegodont, these are obviously your carnivorous teeth. They're scissor-like. They're made for obviously cutting meat. Stegodont there. And then the Bunodont, this is like your omnivores. This is a pig here. Got omnivore, a little bit of both for eating meat and plant materials and a little bit of everything. That's the Bunodont condition there. But now we'll get into adaptations. Obviously, you can see here these two lagomorphs. These rabbits are quite different, and we'll get into that. So there's kind of two ecological rules here. Allen's rule states that the extremities are reduced in animals inhabiting colder regions. So if we go back and see this, the extremities are reduced, right? Look how long the legs are on this jackrabbit versus this guy. He's got tiny little legs and ears and everything, so that holds true. And then Bergman's rule states that animals increased in body size with increased altitude or latitude. So as you're going up say a mountain, or you're going to be further north, the body size will increase. So you think like the deer around here, Texas deer versus the Kansas and Canada deer, they're known for their size. They're just bigger. And so what plays into that is the volume and mass changes rapidly. So as you get bigger, your volume increases a lot more than your surface area does, and that's a huge deal. And it kind of plays into a lot of different things that we'll get into. If you think like a little baby, like if you're holding a baby, they're like little fireball. They got two, well, they're 6 and 8 now, but you just remember holding them. They're little. They don't have so much surface area compared to the volume. They're just putting off so much heat. And so, like if you're thinking about a polar bear, they're super huge and big. They have a lot more volume compared to their surface area, so they're able to stay warmer and not lose so much heat. So it plays a big factor into that. Some ways to regulate temperature. So most mammals don't migrate. Some do, like bats, but so they got to deal with the different temperatures where they live. And there's also a linear relationship between body size and metabolism. So if you think about a little mouse running around versus an elephant, there obviously that metabolism of that little mouse is going to be a lot higher. And like Michael was saying, the heartbeat, the faster the heartbeat is, it's the same true with mammals, that the shorter lifespan that individual is going to have versus a slower heartbeat can be a larger individual who's going to live longer. Some insulation, you think about the polar bear, the whales have great insulation to combat the temperatures and the appendages. So shorter or longer, depending on whether your climate is hotter or colder. Just your coloration itself can help you retain heat or absorb some heat. And then, think about bears in dormancy. You're just going to hibernate, say, just take a nap. I'll wake up when it's nicer outside, and we'll go from there. Temperature adaptation. So the things to deal with the heat and the cold. Obviously, they're sweating and panting. We, sweat. The dogs, think about your dog panting. Insulation, you get larger ears, kind of dissipate, goes back into surface area. Think about, when it's hot outside, you just it's really hot, you just want to lay down and you're spreading out, you're creating more surface area. And then when it's cold, you're kind of bundled up and you're decreasing that surface area. The same thing with having big ears or small ears. Countercurrent heat exchange, we'll get into that a little bit. It's pretty cool stuff. And then estivation and hibernation, that's kind of your dormancy versus wintertime or summertime. Really cool. I mean, it's countercurrent heat exchange, right? So your blood's coming from your heart, right? It's going out to your extremities, and you can see an example A here. It's going out 30 to 7 degrees Celsius, and it's getting cooler as it goes to your hand. And it's getting colder, and by the time it gets down to your body, you're back to your body and your heart, it's at 16 degrees. So that's going to cool you off really quickly. Where in this example, the veins run right next to each other. So this starts out 37 degrees, and it gets colder, but then it starts warming back up from the warm blood going out. so by the time it gets back to you, it's only 1 degree cooler, so it's not that, you know, detrimental to your body temperature. So pretty cool stuff. Here we have like this venous blood nasal patches. So, you know, it's super hot, a cooled area, but it goes back to the brain at 40 degrees when it's coming out at 43 degrees Celsius. So it goes out and it gets cooled down in this evaporated nasal passages, and then it goes into your brain, so it keeps the animal from overheating. So really cool adaptations to beat the heat. Osmoregulation, so ways to combat, you know, your water gain or water loss. Obviously, you can just drink water. You can get water from your food. So if you're herbivore, you're breaking down cell walls of your plants. You can get food from that way, or you know, obvious one is like a watermelon. Lots of water in there. You get it from your food, and then your metabolic water. So like if you're eating like some fatty foods, when you're breaking down fat or some foods like that, a byproduct is water, so you'll get it from that as well. Some ways to reduce your water loss. Obviously, you can't just do it at the drop of a hat, but if you're born and your species is developed this way, lengthen your colon to absorb more water. So think of like your horses, you know, think about when their droppings are really dry. So they've evolved in areas that didn't have a lot of water. So they're trying to get all that water back as much as they can. Whereas, you know, a cattle, some pretty runny droppings, if you will. So they didn't have to worry about reducing their water loss. So they didn't, you know, have that lengthened colon to worry about. Another cool thing is that you're concentrating your urine with effectiveness of your kidneys. So there's like some species of rodents that can like actually drink salt water and, you know, filter that salt out just because their kidneys are so effective, and they can still get the water from that. And then one way to not lose any water is just lose your sweat glands and don't even sweat, but that kind of can be detrimental. But you won't lose water, but you're going to have to find some cool areas, like pigs, for instance. Some ways you lose water is obviously from urination, evaporation through your sweat, and then for females, lactation uses a lot of water. Okay, we'll get to talking here into locomotion now. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool little critter there. So some ways to get around plantigrade. Some really cool some vocab to impress your friends here. Plantigrade is when you're walking on your feet just like we are. There's a squirrel example there. Digigrade is walking on your toes like a dog and cats. And then you have ungulgrades, like your ungulates. So this is like your deer. They take it one step further and they just, you know, walk on their toenails. Why not? So pretty crazy to think about. It's crazy to think about just walking on your toes, and then to take it one step further and just walk on your toenails. But you can see there, it's all about lengthening your foot and your stride, you know, predator-prey relationship. It's really, really neat, really cool. Can't imagine walking on your toenails, but it's obviously very effective for them. So here's some really cool, more vocab for you to impress your friends. Ambulatory that's just basic walking movement. Cursorial is running. Cursorial is like a dog. They don't. Of course they do walk, but like they're just gonna run forever. So they're more of a cursorial animal. Where ambulatory, like a bear, is kind of just gonna walk around, you know. Or cursorial run for long, like a wolf. So just run forever. And saltorial and ricocheting are kind of the same, like a leaping, a bounding. Like a kangaroo or a kangaroo rat, they're bounding and hopping. Brachiating, so whenever you get on the monkey bars, and that's your brachiating. So think about swinging in the trees. That's brachiating, going from hand over hand. Volant is flying like bats. Gliscent is gliding, like we saw that lemur. Boreal, so your tree-dwelling animals, and then fossorial burrowing animals like armadillos and badgers and things like that. All right, we'll get into distribution of mammals now. So things the way how mammals got distributed. There's a couple different ways here. Corridor. This allows passage without a barrier. It's like the Bering Land Sea. So there's just an opening there. You just walk on in, and you have access to all those resources, and you know, go on and have at it. So but also there's a filter, and this is if you can make it through, have at it. But then some species won't be able to make it through, like the Panamanian isthmus. So I'll show you here in the slide in a minute. And then there's kind of like a sweepstakes where happenstance or a hurricane or tornado, you kind of get just really random event. But here's the filter. So obviously we have North America and South America and this Panamanian isthmus. So you can make it through the tropical forest. These critters have access to it. So a lot of your armadillos, anteaters, and sloths, they couldn't make it through. So that's why we don't have them here in our part of the world. But some did, like a porcupine and a possum that came through. And then heading down south, some of these critters were stopped. Shrews, kangaroo rats, pocket gophers, they couldn't make it through the forest. So it's pretty interesting, just a barrier there to cross. So when I worked at the nature center, obviously I love the bison, so I had to include the picture there. Really miss those guys, but I see them every now and then when I stop by there. So picking a mate, sexual selection there. This one here we'll talk about is intrasexual selection. So male competition, obviously we have two white-tailed deer here battling. So they're in direct competition for access for the females. So the stronger male wins and chases off the less dominant male, and then he'll have access to the female there. So kind of playing in, strength and fitness goes into your selection for your mate there. And you have intersexual selection where the males are kind of advertising, the females choosing. This one has a pretty cool example because sometimes these are not associated with fitness, where here we have an iris elk, which is extinct now. So the females kept choosing these elk with the larger antlers. And so the larger antlers got to breed, and so they just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, they live in Ireland in these peat moss bogs, and they started sinking and not being able to travel as well. So it kind of ran away. This is called runaway selection. They just got too big to where they couldn't even get around anymore over time. And so it kind of led to their extinction. So pretty interesting result there. Different mating seasons obviously have monogamy, six male and female partners for their life. And then you have polygamy, polygyny, polyandry, and then promiscuity. So you have male with multiple female partners, or female with multiple male partners, and then promiscuity is just, multiple partners on both sides. Resource defense polygamy. So you have a male who has an area that has a bunch of resources in it, and he kind of defends that area, and then invites the females in. They obviously enjoy the rewards of the resource and the protection from the male. Male dominance polygamy, where he's just kind of beating up on the other males, not necessarily as a result to the resources. And then you have just scramble polygamy, where I think about like mountain lions on this one. Their area that they roam is just so huge, they kind of run upon a female or the opposite sex, and then that's kind of how you choose your mate there, just happenstance really. Different reproduction patterns, like we talked about a little bit earlier, monitoring your laying egg mammals, your duck-billed platypus, echidnas, and then you have your marsupials, which have a short gestation, which is extensive development after the birth, and then your therian mammals, like we are, your long gestation and the variable development after birth. A couple of different ways of development here. Some pretty cool examples. We'll get into delayed fertilization. So a lot of these are in bats, but I think they're really, really cool. So bats of these two different families, I can't even pronounce it. I'm not going to try. So copulation takes place in September and October before hibernation, and then the sperm become mobile, and then they're stored in the uterus. And in the springtime, they're ovulated, and the sperm become mobile, and then the fertilization takes place. So pretty cool there. Just kind of put things on pause for a second and then continue it later. Here we have delayed development. So this difference, so the sperm fertilizes the egg, and then you have a bliocyst, which is like 200 to 300 cells, and then implants, but the development is very slow. So this is again shown in bats, but so when the insect's availability is really slow, or it's just not there yet, the development is just really slow. And then when the insects show up, or they get there, then we can kick that development into high gear whenever the timing's good. So I think that's pretty cool. You're kind of guaranteeing, hey, we'll just, if things aren't right, we'll just slow things down and then kick it into high gear when things are good. So pretty cool adaptation there. This one is delayed implantation. So the ovulation, copulation, and fertilization occur normally. And then the development of that bliocyst, that 200 to 300 cells floating around and kind of suspended, so it doesn't implant like it did before in the last example. And this can be seen in some of your other species, as bears, rodents, and armadillos, to name a few there. All right, this one's crazy. It's gonna blow your mind. Embryonic diapause. So we got a lot of things happening here, and this is kind of shown in your marsupials. So the bliocyst enters a state of dormancy during which division and growth of the cells may cease or continue at a slow pace. So here we go. This example here, this kangaroo mates, that has just really short gestation, right? Then it gives birth to the tiny little guy. That little guy suckles for 235 days. But shortly after giving birth to that really tiny little Joey, right, he mates again. And then this becomes in diapause, so it's just kind of hanging out, waiting and waiting and waiting. Well, this joint's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the diapause implant starts true gestation, which is only 33 days long, and then the Joey starts leaving the pouch. Well, then he gives birth to the second one, and then that one starts suckling. Well, shortly after that, she mates again, and then this starts. So there's 3 different various stages of, she's got this one that's coming and going. There's one on the nipple, and then there's the one in the diapause. So that's really cool. It's kind of crazy to think about. Really cool. A lot of stuff going on in the kangaroos that you didn't really know about. I didn't anyways. So how are we doing on time? I know we kind of blew through that. Is there any questions? Anybody got anything right now? Let's chat. So we had one question: why are there so many tooth colors, red, yellow, etc.? So a lot of that. So you can see in beavers, that red is that iron, and that iron is strong, and it's kind of protecting the outer layer of those teeth. And then some of the kind of yellow is just from different things that they're eating. Just they don't obviously get to brush their teeth, so over time it'll become discolored. Which carnivores also supplement their food with berries or plants or foxes? Yep. So yeah, obviously coyotes and foxes are carnivores, so they do eat meat, but they'll go ahead and eat. It's kind of their body's way of saying it. And even so you think about a carnivore, and it makes a kill, right? And so it's going to eat the innards of that animal too. So it's getting some roughage, if you will, from that animal. So it's getting, it's plant, it's salad, if you will. But it also supplement with berries and plants here and there. But obviously their main food is the meat. Possums are herbivores. They pretty much eat anything. They'll tend to eat anything they'll come across. So 8:10. What's my time limit? About 8:30?
Actually, you can go until 9.
Okay. Or we'll see where we're at with this skull identification. This is my favorite part, so we'll see how we go from here. Any more questions? Yeah, go Texans, go Tarleton. We'll go. Let me turn my light on here.
Hey, with the possums, do they fit that same kind of breeding structure? Where they have the 3 at the same as kangaroos?
That's a good question. I hadn't looked into that. Obviously, they are marsupials. I'm not sure if they do that diapause. That's a good question. I'll have to look into that. But yeah, a lot of people. I don't know. When I was a little kid, I didn't know that a possum was a possum, but yeah, they are marsupials as well. So I'll have to look into that. That's a good question. All right. So common skull identification. I've put this slide up here. This is actually taken there at the Nature Center. I love, obviously the outdoors and walking and getting on trails. And one of the things I love, obviously, is finding skulls. So this is an example of, a skull you would find. They're kind of hard to tell. They kind of blend in after a while in the leaf litter there. But once you kind of get your sight picture, it's just like with everything, like your birding. Once you kind of start picking up on it, you'll find more and more. One advice: you'll find game trails and things like that. It kind of becomes pretty addictive, and it's a lot of fun. So we'll start with the first one. This one's right here. This is how big it is. So I kind of have some scale. Let me turn my filter off. There we go. You see my office here. But so this is the critter we're after. Anybody got any guesses? Really common around here.
Is it a deer?
Yep. This is a deer, white-tailed deer. Good job. So here we have an herbivore. Things you notice, they have eyes on the opposite side of their head, right? They're not like a carnivore looking forward. The teeth, they have the selenodont dentition, right, with the ridges parallel with the jaw. And this area right here we call it diastema, and so there's no upper incisors. There's just kind of a rough patch. They do have some lower incisors, but they have this area here. So you think about vegetation is really hard to break down, right? The cell wall. Think about cattle and chew on their cud, they swallow it, and a 4-chambered stomach, and chew it, swallow it, regurgitate it, chew it again. So there's a lot going on. So their teeth help with that. But this diastema, it gives them room to kind of manipulate that material within their jaw and to break it down further. So up here, you notice on this jaw up here, this is called a mandible condyle here. It's way up top. And what that allows is the lower jaw and the bottom jaw come together as one. And so they can kind of use that. Remember, we talked about your jaw being able to go to side. It's huge. And they're manipulating that foliage and breaking it down. And those teeth are coming together all at the same time. Whereas I'll show you in another example in the carnivores, where it's in line with the lower jaw and it actually makes a cutting action. So one thing, if you find just a lower jaw laying around, if this, have an example here. So this is way up here above the teeth, right? So this is an omnivore, but so it's kind of in between. But if you just find a lower jaw, you can, and it doesn't have any teeth, all the teeth are falling out. Oh, it's an herbivore. We know that. So some things to start looking for. Obviously, this is a female, doesn't have antlers. If you find one with antlers, dead giveaway. It's white-tailed deer around here, anyways. The DFW area. All right, this one's really common, and I have to say it's probably my favorite, or one of my favorites, if not my favorite. Any guesses? Anybody? Where's Karen at?
Is it a wild hog?
No. Okay. Oh yeah. I forgot. Okay, here's my scale. Sorry.
I think someone said raccoon.
Okay, good. Yep, that's it. So this is a raccoon. Not very big. One of the things I look for, obviously, is raccoons are really smart. They're getting into all your stuff. I know birders really love it when they get into their bird feeders and tear all their bird feeders up. But you can see how big this brain cavity is, right? So that's one dead giveaway. You think about raccoons being smart. They have big brain. They're omnivores. So they have these teeth here aren't cecodonts, so they're not carnivorous. They're kind of a bonodont, which is, you know, made for meat and foliage, omnivore, anything. They eat berries, everything they can eat. They do have these large canines that look pretty fierce. Kind of hard to tell. You can see from my example here. But just a really cool looking skull. You'll find them quite a bit through the woods there. But that's the big thing for me on raccoon identification is the big brain. Just look out for that. That'll help you ID that one. All right, here we go. Get this one over here. So I wish, you know, we used to do this in person, obviously, and I could pass them around and could really see them. But we gotta make do. Fox, that's a good guess. It's not a fox. It's about the same size as a fox.
Coyote?
No. Smaller than a coyote. Buddy? Okay. This one's got lots of teeth. So it's got more teeth than any other critter we have. Think about, you ever run across one who just kind of open?
Possum. Somebody wrote possum in the thing.
Yeah, possum. So that they're kind of, they have like, I don't know, 58. They have more teeth than any other mammals that we're going to talk about. And they kind of use that as an imitation. Look at all my teeth. Don't come near me. Don't mess with me. So that's one thing you'll notice if you find a skull. It's got tons of teeth in it. Might be a possum. And another thing I'll show you here, if you look at my mouse, this is called the sagittal crest. It goes along the top here, on top of their head. It has a very large sagittal crest. And this allows for muscle attachment. You'll see it later on in your coyote, in your canine, so strong bite. And then the poor possum has a really small brain cavity you can see there. So if you notice that really small brain, that's the poor possum. But he's pretty cool. He's got lots of teeth. Really cool. That's the possum. I think this one might be the one you gave me. People always hand me skulls or dead critters that I have to clean up, but I'm appreciative of it. Yep, possum there. All right, here we go. This little guy, so he looks huge on the picture, but in reality,
Is this a squirrel?
not a squirrel. Is close. Good guess.
Mouse.
What's that?
Be sure you know well how to access 911.
Mouse.
Another exciting development is
This is I don't know, somebody had my, I need to keep squirrel, gopher, chupacabra. That's a good guess. I gotta start looking.
Groundhog?
This is a eastern cottontail. So the squirrel was a good guess because squirrels look really similar. One thing you'll notice here on so if you look in your book on 524, you kind of have your orders, and this is a lagomorph, which are hares and rabbits. You kind of go over your orders there on page 524. Lagomorphs, and you'll notice here on the rostrum where this kind of ladder work. It's kind of to make them lighter, you know, like Mike was talking about, lighter to make them quicker. You see it in birds, but one of the other giveaways, you can barely see it here on the upper incisors. There's a kind of like a dual incisors where it's right behind each other. So it kind of supports the main incisors, and there's support here. So when you see that, that's a dead giveaway of a lagomorph. So it's going to be a rabbit, whether it be a cottontail or a jackrabbit. The jackrabbits will be bigger, and you just kind of have to figure out what area of the state you're in, kind of go about it that way. But when you see that double incisors, dead giveaway for a rabbit. I'm going to convert a bunch of you into skull hunters, so I hope y'all send me some pictures of skulls you find. All right. No incisors behind here. Little guy. Somebody had just said it.
Squirrel?
Yeah. Okay, so squirrels are pretty common. Obviously, they run. This is a fox squirrel, and I'm not going to get into. And I don't even know how you would go about telling. There's going to be a key out there somewhere that can tell you from like a gray squirrel or a fox squirrel, but that's really getting into the weeds of it. You'll have to take maybe some dental formula information or some measurements and things like that. But you obviously, you see it's an herbivore. You have this diastema here. You have these large incisors that never stop growing. They're constantly growing. It's a rodentia. It's a rodent. What else? Really small. And so when you get into your rodentia, especially if you ever take mammalogy, there's like a million. They're just, and they all look the same. And so when you get into your rodents, you can say, yeah, you'll get it. So obviously when we want to get it down to species, but we may not always be able to do that with the information that we have at hand. So you see this, you got, oh, that's a rodent. And then if you want to go further, you're really going to have to get into the weeds of it, start taking some measurements and things like that. And we're not going to go into it, but this is a fairly large rodent. You know, it's a lot bigger than, not a lot bigger than a rat, but definitely a mouse for sure. And it did not have any of that lattice work that we saw on the rabbit. And then obviously, again, the no double incisors. So there's that as well. This is the big dog. Everyone's worst nemesis. Got the tusk. There are about a bajillion of them running around. Check my chat here. Yep. Hog, nailed it right off the bat. This is pig. So unfortunately, they are very common. We wish they weren't, but dead giveaways. The bonodont dentition, obviously the canines there, the tusks. Have upper and lower incisors. I mean, see it. They're large. They just look like a pig. It kind of once you see them all the time, they're very heavy. This is heavy duty. Obviously, the males they're fighting. They're just a robust animal, very tough. And then one thing I'll point out here, we have on this hog here, you see how it's real flat. And then once you get into your domesticated hogs, and you'll start seeing like a forehead right here. And so what happens is domestic hogs, when they get turned loose or they escape or whatever, they'll have that big forehead. And then slowly after a few generations and so forth, they'll start losing that. It's just kind of a common thing you see in domestication. And I'll show it to you in some other things as well. But so yeah, you'll see that as you think of that's a feral hog right there. Not very far off from a domestic hog, because he's relying. When you start thinking about domestication, you see that forehead. They're losing surface area in their nose, right? Because they're domesticated, they don't have to use this as much. So so it just kind of gets evolved out, if you will. And whereas if you're relying on your nose to live, you're going to want as much surface area as you can to smell as much as you can to find food. But that one's pretty easy. Obviously, they range in size from little piglets to 300 pounds, easy. And then the males will have more developed tusks than the sows. The boars will be quite a bit bigger. Looks like no brain cavity. I thought they were intelligent. Yeah. Let's see here. It's fairly large. It's not like the raccoon, obviously, but it's decent. Not huge, not little, but wish I could pass them around. But if you go to the nature center, there's usually some skulls around. Ooh, one of my favorites here. This one's really cool. This one always throws people for a loop. And Any guesses? Let's see what the chat says. Mole? No. A mole. Where's Ben? Show you the
Dolphin.
size. Bat?
Dolphin.
Dolphin? No. It's not quite that big. So look, notice the one thing you'll notice right off the bat is this. Instead of the heterodont dentition that we talked about, this is the homodont. All the teeth are the same, pretty primitive. Eyes basically lacking in the back, not really using their eyes very much. Looks aquatic. Is it a gar? No, I wouldn't do that to you. The armadillo, yeah, somebody got it. That's it, armadillo. Ooh, bat. I wish I had a bat. I don't have a bat. So at the Nature Center, there is a bat. You have to probably ask around for it. Tell them you know me, and then you want to see the bat. They'll go find it. It's really tiny. It's a replica, but it's really cool. So yeah, so this armadillo, really, really cool. I mean, it looks like, you know, people say, oh, it's an alien. What, you know, what's going on here? So if you think about it, now that you know it's an armadillo, they don't use their eyesight. They're just strictly, you know, using their nose, and they're eating grubs, right? So they don't need their heterodont dentition. I said, you know, we're just eating grubs and soft insects. So we'll just go with this real peg-like teeth here. Brain. Now you got me thinking about the brain sizes. It's actually fairly large. It's bigger than the possum. But the dead giveaway right there on a armadillo is those peg-like teeth, and those eyes are really far in the back. And once you see it, you can't forget that that's an armadillo. That's a really cool one. Next one here. I keep saying this, they're all my favorites, but this one's one of my favorites too. So. This is fairly large. It's round. Got large eyes, right? With the eyes are looking forward. So it tells you carnivores got big, large teeth. Canines. Oh yeah, bobcat, bobcat, bobcat. Awesome. Yep, y'all know y'all's bobcat skulls. Definitely got that one down, so I don't even have to talk about it. But I will anyways, because I love it. Large brain, big eyes, looking forward, large canines. So one thing on the cat, like we talked about in that dental formula earlier, it's like the opposite of a possum. There's like no teeth. There's hardly any teeth. So if you just find a lower jaw like this guy here, not very many teeth, but they're all carnivorous, the cegadont dentition, it's going to be a cat. And it will be hard to tell between like a domestic or a feral cat between a bobcat. The bobcat will be bigger, but if you don't have them side by side, it'll be really tough to tell. You have your premolars, and then your molars. It's just like, I can't even tell. There's just a tiny little, it's not even existent. It's vestigial, basically. But here, so I wanted to show you, this is the mandible condyle here. This is where the lower jaw meets the upper jaw. And so when that's coming down, it's making a scissor action. Whereas we had before, this is the pig, but when those teeth come down, they all come down the same for like the grinding action versus the cutting action. So just different tips to kind of help you at least get started in your identification. Bobcats, obviously don't see a lot of them around. They're obviously pretty elusive, so they're kind of hard to find, but just round, not very many teeth, big eyes, bobcat. Easy. All right, this one shouldn't be too bad. It's fairly large. Yeah, nailed it. Coyote for sure. Here we go. We got, you know, just everyone, you know, knows what a dog looks like. It's basically the same thing, except you'll notice if you're petting your dog at home, they'll start noticing this forehead. You just talk about domestication, like how it's out there in the field, relying on its nose a lot. It needs as much surface area as it can get. It does have a fairly large brain. Then you see the sagittal crest right here up at the top. So obviously they have a strong bite for muscle attachment up here. It's very, it just looks like a dog. So it's coyote, and then this obviously is, so it's, as big as my hands, a little bit bigger than my hand. It's a coyote. And then when you get into your foxes, they obviously look really similar, but there's a couple different ways you'll be able to tell. And I'll get into that in a minute. So this one I don't have an example of it. I don't have one here, but so here it looks just like the one we saw, right? Unfortunately, I don't have an example, but so it's like a mini version. This is a red fox. Vulpes is the genus and species, right? And so if you look at the top, this will come into play when we go into the next species, but this sagittal crest kind of makes it V, which V for Vulpes. It's got a large brain, carnivorous teeth, inline, just looks like a little coyote, but that's a red fox. And then we'll go into this next one. I'll go ahead and say this is a similar size. I don't have one here with me, but this is a gray fox, and not even in the same species or genus as a red fox, but this genus right here is Eurocyan, and this you can see right here makes a U. See that over on the top of the head. So if you find a gray fox and you see that U right there on top, hey, we got a gray fox here. So dead giveaway there. This is just a neat way to remember that. Other than that big U there, they're same size, pretty similar. You got your carnivorous teeth. They're about the size of of the raccoon here. It's about that size. So you'll find some raccoon skulls for sure once you start looking. The foxes are hard to come by. I don't have one. I'll have to keep looking. But so here we have your canids side by side. Size comparison. You have your coyote right here, red fox, and gray fox. So now you can really see side by side. Just look at this U for your sign. That's your gray fox. And then red fox, Vulpes. Vulpes is your genus. It kind of makes it B there. You squint your eyes and tilt your head, you can see it. Oh, this is a good one. Anybody's got a guess? Here's the size comparison, little guy. Pretty cool. Got lots of teeth, are pretty menacing looking. This one is yeah, skunk, awesome. Yep, skunk, nailed it. Good job. Yeah, skunks. A lot of people don't. I didn't, anyways. Think about those teeth look so menacing. They have some pretty ferocious looking teeth there. But so skunks, they're kind of. I don't have a really good way to help identify them. They're obviously smaller. One thing I look for is there's like this swooping hood on the back of their skull here. Kind of comes far back and swoops up. But once you start, really looking into them, it's just like with anything where Michael could tell you, oh, that's well, these sparrows, and he's like, yeah, it looks like that species because I've seen a million of them. And once you just start looking at them, you'll really get into it. And he shows me a sparrow, and I'm like, what are you talking about? That is the striped skunk. All right, here we go. Who's gonna get it first? Beaver. I knew it. I tricked you. Not a beaver, but non-native.
Oh, nutria.
Yeah. Yeah, always get everyone with that. It's easy. It's basically, here it is. This is this is a nutria. It does look a lot like a beaver, but once I show you this one thing, you'll be blown away, and you won't mistake it again. So right here, if you follow my mouse, this area right here is called the infraorbital foramen. It's a little hole, right? Well, this on the nutria, it's huge. So the eye socket's way back here. And on the nutria, this thing is huge, infraorbital foramen. So that's a dead giveaway for a nutria. Obviously, it has the rodent teeth, looks like a beaver. And then on the lower jaw, because a lot of times I just find a lower jaw, and I was like, is that a beaver or a nutria? Well, you can tell see how on the bottom it flares out right there? On the nutria, that's a dead giveaway for a nutria, is that flared out lower jaw. So if you just find the lower jaw, you can still tell between a nutria and a beaver. Yeah, the infraorbital foramen is what it's called there, for Morgan was asking. Yep, that's a nutria. Here we go, dead giveaway. Just talked about it, the beaver. So this is that hole. This is the infraorbital foramen right there. See how tiny it is on the nutria? Just a little bitty guy. And so once you kind of see that in the eye sockets back here, what does it do? Oh, what does it do? So on the nutria, it just allows for like nerve passages and stuff like that. But then on the nutria, it's a little bit larger for like some of their muscle attachments and things like that. But some nerves will go through there, and it's just a foramen. Foramen is like a hole in your skull, like you have for your brain. Have the magna foramen in the back of the skull here. It's just skull terminology, but the infra. So here's the hog. You have the infraorbital foramen there. It's just a hole in front of the infraorbital in front of your eye. So there's the beaver, and then here they are side by side, so you can really tell there. Boom, boom, dead giveaway. So you'll know for next time. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then here on the lower jaw of the beaver, it doesn't flare out, and it does on the nutria. And this one is the deer mouse. So it's what I was talking about earlier, the rodentia. I mean, look at this thing. It's just tiny. It looks just like the squirrel, just tinier. It just, looks rodent-like. Looks like this is a mouse. One cool way to get these mice skulls is if you find owl pellets. So when the owl regurgitates this fur bowl, you can get in there, and there's awesome little cool, perfectly cleaned. That's how I got this one skull. So really cool, and it's just a lot of fun. Really cool to get the kids involved. Open those owl pellets up, and they've already done the cleaning for you, so you don't have to get all dirty. I can talk about that for pretty gross. It's not for the faint of heart, cleaning skulls, but if you want to get some really cool ones, it's necessary. So that's the deer mouse, and that's the rodents. It's 8:40. I got a slide or two more. Here I have side by side raccoon and gray fox. So obviously here a sign for gray fox and raccoon. So these I just wanted to put together, they're similar size, things you want to notice for a huge brain on the raccoon. Obviously it just bounces, right to my eye, just draws my attention. And then your raccoon here in the back, it's kind of like your more omnivorous teeth, your monodont teeth, where the fox is going to be carnivorous. So just an example there. That's all I got for you. There's my email. You can, of course, email me if you have any questions or find some stuff. And I know it's hard through pictures, because I've gotten some in the past. So I won't always be able to, it's hard to, I can lead you in the right direction if you send me some pictures of some skulls, but I'd definitely be happy to help any way I can. But again, I appreciate you having me. One last thing is this book is The Mammals of Texas by Smidley and Bradley. It's a really good book. There's a couple, this is the 7th edition, but it's a really good mammal books, Mammals of Texas, and it kind of goes over your distribution. Really good book. I recommend it. Mammals of Texas. But that's all I got for you. Thanks for having me. Any more last minute questions?
So what is your cleaning process?
So I got actually, so this was like, I get really jazzed about this stuff, but my Bobcat is super clean. I'm really proud of it, super white. But then I have some that, so it's varied over the years, and I kind of tried different techniques. There's the maceration where you can put in a bucket of water, try to put in a mesh bag, and just kind of let that natural bacteria break it down. It gets real stinky. It's got a little messy. You got to change the water, and it's got some smell to it. Buried them, but now I've kind of gotten to this technique where hopefully it's a fresher specimen, and then I use a power washer. So it's, like I said, it's not for the faint of heart, but I kind of just put on all of this slick, like basically rain gear, and I put the power washer, and I just kind of clean it as best as I can, and then I'll put it in a pot of boiling water with some OxyClean to help kind of degrease it, and then it's a hydrogen peroxide solution, so it's like a pool cleaner that you dilute, and then you kind of bring it up to a boil, and then let it simmer for about 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how big it is, and just kind of have to play with it, and that's what I've kind of been doing over the years, and it's really been working for me. But yeah, I can help you with that if you want.
Also, kind of follow up from earlier, we were discussing about the legality of keeping bird feathers. How does that apply to animal skull and bones as well if something's on in season?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and obviously there's a lot of these are like non-game species, so there's really no concern there. But for your game species, like it's like this one, I hadn't cleaned. I just kind of found it like this, and it's just kind of naturally cleaned, right? So if you have this, it's pretty evident that you didn't harvest this that morning, because there's no way it would look like that. So, and obviously they're not illegal to possess, because you could have shot this or harvested this or found it years ago. Basically, the burden is on the proof of the game warden, but whether you want to put yourself in that situation. So I'd obviously proceed with caution for like your game animals, but like for obviously like this one is going to be good to go. It's like there's no way, this is obviously have years of been outside and not freshly harvested. So things to keep in consideration when you are possessing things like that. But for the most part, there's not too big of an issue on that. Any more questions? No. All right. Well, thanks again for having me. I don't know if Mike's going to end it, or if Sharon wants to take over. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Oh yeah. Hey Melinda, how's it going?
Doing great. See, did we miss anything in the chat?
Oh, thank you. Good there.
No, just a lot of thank yous. You did great, Nick.
Hey, appreciate it, Mike.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it so much.
See y'all.
All right. Michael, do you have anything to say before we shut it down?
I have nothing else to say, but I'm here if you have any questions. But nothing to say.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you again. We really appreciate your help with all that we do and putting these classes together.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Do a lot of great work for us, and we definitely appreciate it. So, all right. So I guess we'll see everybody on Saturday. And if you can't get, if you feel free to text me as well, if you have some sort of a question or a problem that you're concerned with, and I'll be happy to help you. And if I can't help you, I'll be happy to shuffle you off to Michael or Laura,
Not me.
or well, you know,
Yeah, I know.
not you. Let's say Laura.
I'll be on the soccer and the baseball fields on Saturday. So I won't-
Aha, okay. Okay, that's great. So anyway, y'all let me know if you have any questions or problems. And I guess we'll see everybody Saturday. If anybody has any other questions before we go.
Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good night, everyone.